I think you should move your image a little on the side so the text will be seen very well because you're kind of obstructing some of the things.
Thought,
Or maybe as you speak, you can
yeah,
juggle your image.
yeah, that is fine. So let me just, okay. So this one you are seeing me on the side, isn't it?
Yes, yes, I'm seeing you on the side.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, should we start? It's 9 o'clock, right? Or still?
Okay, someone is here.
Okay, should we? Or we'll wait for a few more people to join? Or let me just give it a minute and then I'll start.
Mm.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Whilst we are waiting for others, I just wanted to, let you guys know that we are actually currently developing a system where it's using an AI at the background. But what it does is, we all know that people have their personal development plans with their managers, have a conversation and an appraisal. But what we are building is something which will capture the conversation, which will capture the areas of development, and then connect them to certain learning content which is available within the organization or external content, and create a personal development plan for the individual to, for the next 12 months. And it will also create a manager support plan so that the manager can then see if the individual is moving in the right direction. So you're super excited about this. So yeah, I mean, so lots of things are happening. So watch the space. And if any of you want to, kick the tires or participate, just let me know. We'll set something up so you can just try it. We'll develop it with your feedback. So, we can see how it goes from there. Okay. I think we have given enough time. So let us start. And Rachel, if people come in, please let them in. Yeah. So that should be fine. Okay. Today we are going to be talking about the people decisions that are quietly costing you money. Why is this important and why should I be talking about it? Let me just give you a bit of a background. I actually have been, into management consulting for almost 30 years. Prior to that, I was actually working and managed the business and development and all that. Managed a team of 500 people, managed a couple of countries and so on and so forth. I've got a PhD in quantifying the value of human capital. So my specific area is quantifying the intangible. So I've developed quite a few metrics and I've worked with some big organizations and small organizations where we have quantified how employees feel, how customers feel, and we've shown that it actually impacts performance and productivity. Believe it or not, I've seen most of the things, and still I do get surprised. I can't claim to be, what do you call, I've seen everything, but there are things that are, still surprise me. But I've seen most of the challenges, most of the bottlenecks, and most of the issues that exist in organizations, big or small. So the biggest organization I've worked with was with Hilton across EMEA, which had 45,000 employees, and the smallest one was a small company of 8 people based in Henley. So that gives you a range of experience that I've published a few books, written some policy papers for the government, and so on and so forth. And like everyone, I'm also embracing AI. I've got a master's in robotics, which basically is, I got it in 89, so that tells you my age, but hey ho. Now, I have seen a lot of issues around people, a lot of, from management accounting perspective, it's all classified under goodwill. And when people issues surface, we really don't have any clear metrics on what leaders should be focusing on, and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do today is to walk you through some of the things that you should be aware of, or maybe ask your boss or your colleagues to become aware of, so that you can start focusing on the right things and get people going. Okay, when this moves, and I don't know why this is not moving. Okay, I know why, because, okay. Okay, now this is how people actually, I know, measure the real cost. As per their perspective. When people start looking at it, leaders talk about revenue, profit, top line, bottom line, productivity, and so on and so forth. But good ones start looking at the cost of hiring, cost of poor hiring, cost of weak leadership, cost of burnout, the impact of trust and disengagement on the whole equation, and how that impacts performance and productivity. So if you look at this image here, this is basically where and how traditional measurement starts. We all start with a performance metric, right? You have targets, you have people targets, you have sales targets, you have operational targets, targets for everything. So you start measuring performance. And what you're doing is people will behave in a certain way. You expect people to behave in a certain way, which means that behavior will hopefully give you the results that you're looking for. So I'm going to be talking about the underlying causes, also underlying issues that are actually driving it. So for performance, it is behavior that matters. If you don't display the right behavior, then performance is not going to happen. And that's why you have disciplinary committees and things like that, and people don't do it, and when people miss targets, they try and address the behavioral challenge of things. Now, behavior, if you look at it, is the result of what you decide to do, right? And that is engagement. If you decide the engagement, then you will demonstrate the right kind of behavior that is expected of you. Now, companies have been measuring employee engagement for quite some time, right? And that is the first big metric that moved beyond performance and productivity to really understand why people are not being productive. So engagement became a big thing. And there is still a debate about whether there is a link between engagement and performance and productivity and so on and so forth. But for you to be engaged, that underlying cause, right? That the trigger is you need to think, yeah, I feel I am part of this organization. I feel this group. I feel this community. I am part of this community. You need to think that you're valued. You need to think you're respected. So only when you think these things, then you would take a decision to become engaged with the organization, engaged with the role, which then spills over as behavior, which then impacts performance. Now, behavior is something that we all see externally. Thinking is something that happens here. But then that engagement you can start measuring. Now, how we think is influenced by how we feel, right? If you don't feel good about going to work, it's going to impact how you think about work. You think, oh my God, I don't want to go there. And I don't want to be going through another motions, another day. So you become so drawn down when your feelings are not in the right place. Now, that feeling is basically the experience that you actually have with your immediate team and with your manager. Because if you are a hierarchical organization, a bigger organization, then your experience is the direct impact of the interaction that you have with your colleagues, your manager, and maybe a few peer groups within that. Seldom do you actually get to the top level of management unless it is a flat hierarchical structure. But at a deeper level, what happens is for you to feel valued, respected, you need to Stop being afraid of what you are doing or not doing. Start trusting people or the team or the manager and believe that they are actually empathetic towards you and your situation. That is where the core values sit. So, if by understanding this, we can, and by changing this, and by pulling these three levers, you can then start changing how people feel, which can then start impacting how they think, which can change the behavior. So the relationships can actually then create positive experience, which can fuel engagement and impact performance. And I'm giving you this big context primarily because leaders don't start this way. A lot of companies start from the top and go one level deep, and they stop there. But where I have worked with all big or small organizations, we start looking at something deeper. Now, what is it that we could do differently is what I would talk about next. Now, as I told you earlier, leaders who are trying to grow the business have the growth as the primary lever, and they try to pull that by taking risks. By Without taking risks, when I say risks, it's calculated. It could be a calculated risk. It could be venturing into a new market. It could be offering or creating a new product or service. Their product or service could probably be the result of the focus they have on the customers. So they start focusing more on customers. And funnily enough, we have been measuring customer experience where we are trying to understand how the customers are feeling, but we seldom focus on employee experience. We still focus on engagement and productivity. And then when it all comes together, then the next thing they look at it is, okay, we've got great product, we've got a great service, we've got engaged people. How do we build great systems to get things going? Now, this is how the traditional way of thinking works. What really happens is this is a big, big lie that we are living. If this were to work, every organization that is focused on all these should be doing brilliantly. I've known organizations where they are doing well, but their engagement metrics, the employee metrics, don't match up. They have an engagement score. I'm sure a lot of you have seen engagement scores in the 80s and 90s. But if you go back and look at the attrition rates, that is probably 30%. If 90 people are engaged, 90% of the people of the organization are engaged, you should only have 10% who are going to leave the organization, maybe 15% for better prospects, not 30. And I've seen this time and again. It's a simple metric, but then that gives you a clear view of engagement metric is not the right metric to focus on. Now, when you think of that organization, when you think of a team, how are you feeling? That actually makes you wonder whether engagement metrics are giving you the right reality. Now, when we look at the statistics globally, the average organization loses quite a bit of money due to presenteeism. It's not absenteeism, right? It's people coming into work but not doing what they're expected to do or just doing enough to get by. And that cost has been quantified to close to 28 billion. This is just the UK figures, huh? It is 28 billion. That is a lot of money that is left on the table because we are focusing on the metrics around this. And I've talked enough about engagement. Again, this is not my metric. It is from Gallup and a few others, Aon, and studies constantly say that 4 out of 5 employees are not engaged. So if you have a business and if you have a customer, only 20% of your customers are engaged, would you stop at say that and say, you know what, I'm happy 20% of them being engaged? Not really. You would go all out to see that 80% of your customers are engaged. Now, funnily, that does not happen here. And when we go a bit deeper, this is a worrying statistic. Managers who are supposed to help engagement, they are less engaged now. So you can see it has fallen from 31% to 22% between 22 and 25. That's shocking. Now, when we spoke about performance, the pyramid, we talked about relationships. human relationships, which then enhance the experience, which then enhance the engagement, which then enhances the performance. Now, the managers and the team are the core dynamic or the core units of an organization. If they are not engaged, how are they going to motivate the team to do the right thing, which then spills over in how they feel, which they spills over in how they think, and so on and so forth. So this is the challenge currently. By looking at a top-down metric, companies are missing a very obvious trick. And I would call it as the £500,000 mistake. I mean, I could have called it a £1 million, but just being realistic, because I'm looking at some of the numbers, I just calculated this. Like if I'm looking at an organization which has got 50 employees, where they lose 10 employees per year, right? Which is basically 20% attrition. And given the state of flux that we are in, companies do lose quite a few employees. And the average cost for recruitment and retaining and training and getting them to become productive roughly works out to 150K to 200K just on replacement cost. Now then add the factor in the cost of training and the time that the manager or someone else is spending on training, which means they are not going to do the actual work that they are supposed to do. So the cost very, very quickly goes up. So when you start looking at people metrics, don't just look at engagement. Go a bit deeper. We'll talk about what metrics we should be looking at, but this just gives you an example. The next one. Well-being is a big thing. Well-being is a big thing, and people are actually calling in sick. Even yesterday or day before, I read that the doctors, junior doctors in NHS, a lot of them are taking time off or sick leave, saying that they are not feeling well mentally. And that is a worrying thing. And even for a smaller organization like a 75-person business, this is around 300 to 400K if 7 people or 8 people actually decide to take time off due to well-being issues. And we know in the current state that we are in, that is not the case. A lot of people are challenged mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, and that happens to be the common theme across big or smaller organizations, right? So you need to start looking at presenteeism and absenteeism and also how people are feeling, their mental well-being, and what really is happening there. So we can start looking at all this a little bit later, but I'm just giving you another example of the cost of poor well-being. And I'm going to finish off with one more example. If you're looking at a 100-employee business and with 10 to 12% of them being there, not doing what they're expected to do, again, you're looking at 400,000 pounds for a smaller organization, right? And I've been conservative in this case. So you kind of get the drift. By looking at the top line, you start missing out the obvious. This is what I call as the leaky bucket. We are talking about performance. You're like filling more performance, more leads, more revenue. But then if your bucket starts leaking constantly, you're losing employees, you're losing people because of mental well-being challenges or well-being challenges in general. You're losing people because of presenteeism. Suddenly, your bottom line contribution starts going down and it starts narrowing. It also starts feeling that you're running more and more. And this is a common theme that I hear from a lot of businesses where they say, you know what, we seem to be doing a lot of things, we seem to be busy, but it is not really impacting the bottom line. It is not impacting our business profitability. And that's because you have a leaky bucket, my friend, and you need to start looking at it. So hopefully this gives you the context of what we should be looking at and some examples of how this could potentially impact the business. Now we go down a bit further. Let us start looking at it from a business point of view. So if you really look at it, a business needs to have strategy, right? Without a strategy or a plan, nothing is going to work. And then you also have to have the founders or the leadership team that then takes the strategy and then brings it to life. But generally, they need people who will take the strategy and then go and implement it. Now, A great business or any business can have a great strategy, good leadership team, and great employees, but it will not survive without customers. So the customers are the other bit. And for all this delivery that needs to happen between employees and customers, or customers to the strategy perspective, to understand what it means, we need to have clear systems and processes. If this is there, if we don't look at these 5 areas and start looking at it from the point of view of a bottleneck point of view, like for example, if you look at the intersection between customers and employees, that is where the actual delivery happens, right? Your employees are the front facing, I mean, they are the face of the organization, and they deliver products and services to your customer. So when they deliver those products and services, then you start looking at specific functions. In a sales function, what is the cost of having someone who is not trained, doesn't have the product knowledge, and missing targets as a result? So you might say they are missing targets, but then the real reason is not because of them not being there could be multiple reasons, but product knowledge is one thing. So you start looking at that. So that is a simple metric everyone is using. But if you really look at it, why are they not doing this? Is the system a hurdle? Is the leadership team not empowering the employees to go and offer and sell what they are expected to sell? So you can then start looking at each and every activity that happens between customers and employees, and then start quantifying things that could go wrong, which then spills over into a number. And that is where you need to start your focus on, and then start looking at how that impacts, what that is the number that you need to change. But that number can change only when you start doing something internally. So we need to start looking at what is happening inside to impact what is happening outside. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we have done I've worked with hundreds of organizations. And generally, if I am looking at a very big organization, it is not the leadership team, but one level below, and the management, first level of management, right? That is from, if you don't have anyone reporting to you, but you are reporting to someone, those are the 2 levels where their serious blocks kick in. At the top, they know that they are almost there. So they start establishing kingdoms. So then they actually have, building walls around their teams. They become protective of what they are doing, and so on and so forth. The bottom line, the one level above, they are still trying to find their feet. So they're trying to hold on to the power, hold on or exercise power without understanding how it could damage or could be used to get the best out of people. Now, when you're looking at an organization, employee turnover can happen when the leadership team is pretty aggressive, or when your manager is not brilliant. When he or she is not supporting you, or does not value you, does not respect you, then people mentally check out, and then they actually check out when they find the right opportunity, right? So when they mentally check out, they are still present. So the presentation is hurting the business. Then when they check out, you have lost a valuable team member. So there is a cost that is associated with it. So these two could have been detected if you start measuring how people are feeling. So you can go back and see. And then if you start addressing that and the relationship that exists between managers and the teams, then suddenly you can then start looking at the metric and start predicting rather than waiting for the axe to fall on your neck, right? The second thing that we see is lack of clarity. I mean, this basically is probably something that happens when you talk about serving customers. How easy is it to get a refund? And what happens if they actually are frustrated? Because it costs you 70% more to acquire a new customer than retain one, right? So if your existing customers are frustrated and if it is caused by processes and systems, that means you have to spend more time fixing it. And we all know that the time that we actually spend fixing something that has already been built costs more than starting from scratch. If you've got a kitchen that you bring in a builder and you decide to go and remodel your kitchen and the builder messes the whole thing up, for you to get it right and get a next builder in, it's going to cost you more than what you would for the next builder to come and raise it to the ground and start again, right? And so suddenly it has a different perspective and different impact on how you start seeing lack of clarity and its impact on performance. Because if you are not clear and if you're not empowered, you as an employee, you will then defer your decision to your manager. So that's a lag of time. So my time, I have to spend more time doing that again and again with the same customer. If you are not empowered to solve and take clear actions, then you will be wasting your time and effort. Plus, you will also feel frustrated, right? Like I can give an example where we did work with a big high street store. I don't want to name them. See, they basically had empowered their employees, and the customer services team were always told, put customers first. So address them, genuinely talk to them, and then solve their problem after that, and then ensure that they walk away happy, right? And there's a typical example where there was a client who came in and said, I bought this kettle, and he was furious. He said, this is not working and it's all spilling, and he actually banged the kettle. And the customer services person said, I'm sorry, sir. Hopefully you have not got hurt. So we can sort this out. And they then replaced it with a new kettle. It's a small thing. But if you had to go through forms, if you had to go through things, and if you had to do things, the number of times that the customer had to come back, the number of hours that the employees had to spend, you can see suddenly it all starts adding up. So when you tell your employees what they can do or where they can't, that actually prevents rework, which then has an impact on your bottom line. And you can start calculating that effectively. Again, weak accountability is another thing. This is something which we see in an organization where you have people who try to hide behind busyness. Being busy is not being productive, right? We all know that. So as an organization, are we trying to do the same thing again and again? Is what we need to start looking at. How many times do we go to a meeting and say, oh, why are we talking about this again and again and again? Why is nothing happening? Imagine having a meeting of 5 senior leaders who are, let us say, at 100K each, that's 500,000 pounds, and they go back to a meeting 5 times, which is repeated an hour each, that is 5 hours. 5 hours times 5 is 25 hours, which is basically a 1 week of some senior executives' pay. You just spent on one event or one meeting, which basically has not got anything. So by having clear lines of accountability and by avoiding delays, you start looking at what you can change. So you start measuring the delays here and start seeing what is getting delayed, what is the impact of this delay, and how is that going to change if we change? What can we need? What can we change, and how can we change it? So suddenly, by looking at turnover, rework, delays, and the last one, we've spoken about productivity, so I'm not going to go through this. So productivity, why are we getting things done on time? Do we miss the schedules? Do we miss deadlines? If we have a project, is that always delivered? What is the variation? If I ask people these questions, very, very rarely do I get a clean answer. You know what? We take 20% more time than what it is, and we have accounted for it. And generally, funnily enough, people who know that to know an answer to that question also build it as a buffer so they know what the delay would and build that. So these are the numbers you need to start looking at, or these are the things that you need to start looking at and quantifying it so that you can start looking at something. Just don't start at performance. Start at something deeper, right? And this is where we start looking at things differently. Now, this is a classic example or a classic problem for a smaller organization. It's as a founder, and the UK has got, a lot of SMEs. I think it is 32 million or 32.5 million or 40 million SMEs. Of course, one-man bands are there, but then you have, people with more than 5 employees or 10 employees, which is again a significant number. Now, these leaders have built it right from the first day they've been there. For them, it's like watching their child grow. So sometimes, and with our children, we cut the umbilical cord, but with the business, the leaders don't cut the umbilical cord. And that actually creates a lot of problems. And very rarely, small businesses start looking at founder dependency as a bottleneck and how that is impacting the business. If everyone has to come back to you, do you have the time? Do you have the bandwidth and the energy to solve all of this, all of the problems? And if you don't have the time and energy and effort, how are you actually going to get things done? So suddenly, it is not performance, it is at a deeper level, as I told, the founder bottleneck that can actually cause this. And we've developed a very simple framework here, and I'm happy to share this. If you reach out to me, I can share the framework, which can help a founder to understand what is it that they're doing currently, which they can stop completely. What is it that they are enjoying, but needs, can be outsourced or can be done at a leisure, which is not important. And what is it that they need to do, which even if they don't like, they need to do it, and they need to find a palatable way of doing things. Because most of the founders that I have worked with hate paperwork, hate filing accounts. So what can you do to make that as a pleasant experience? Because if you don't do that, there is a cost, there is an impact on the business, there is an impact on you and your team. So you need to find a different way to do it. Like I can give you a specific example. I used to commute to London quite a bit, and it used to be in the morning, and I used to hate going into London at that time. So what I did was I could change that experience because I had to be in for work, but I changed how I went into London. I actually got a camping tool, and I had my, this is, I'm talking quite a while ago. I had my Walkman. So that tells you how long it was. So I used to listen to music, and this is an age where there was no iPad, no Netflix, nothing. So I used to just go there because of the music. I used to feel positive, and I go in, I feel positive, I felt positive, and that way you could change. I walk in with a positive attitude. Remember, when the behavior is positive, then I think and feel positive. Suddenly, I'm much more productive than what I can be, right? Or I'm productive the way I'm supposed to be. Let's put it that way. So by doing things like this, the leaders need to understand what is actually their bottleneck and how it's impacting their business. So when you start looking at people measure, you need to look yourself and your team and what that means from a performance perspective. Accountability, or the lack of it, is basically because of there is no commitment. Why are people not committing is where you need to start asking, rather than focus on why are we not achieving this. What is causing the issue of commitment? And commitment happens only when you think you need to be part of it, which means there is something or someone within the organization or within the team or your boss who's actually causing that friction, right? You need to start understanding that. And by understanding and addressing that, you can start building commitment issues. And I've done this with a lot of organizations where we started looking at what can you do to enhance commitment. And this could be, you can flip this for employees or for customers, because a customer could be getting everything off you, but they will not be accountable for committing to a renewal. You have to really chase them. So then you start seeing what is really happening here. Why are they not committed? So by understanding why they see or don't see the value of what you're offering, you can then start addressing that. For an employee, you then start seeing what is really happening, which is, impacting commitment. And by understanding that, you can then move forward. And it is a simple conversation. It need not be complex tools. It could be a simple conversation with the team, with the individuals, to then see what is really impacting it and then moving from there, right? We spoke about engagement or disengagement. Now, when people are not engaged, and let me remind you that we don't get up and brush our teeth and say, okay, I'm going to go as a disengaged employee. I'm going to make my manager's life hell today. No one does that. But when they walk in through the door, someone or something is preventing them from being the best version of themselves. When that happens, then they are disengaged. So they can't be bothered. When they can't be bothered, you have a lot of mistakes that are happening. Customer satisfaction hits rock bottom. They don't even bother turning up for work. And if they come, they are present, but don't do enough. And of course, they leave when they're completely, disillusioned or find a better opportunity. Now, you need to start looking at what are the things that we could measure from an engagement or a disengagement perspective. So start with what are the mistakes that people are making? How many times are we doing some rework? How long does it take to solve a customer problem? Or how long does it take to get a refund from your organization? Because that then impacts a lot of things. So start deeper. The other bit is well-being. And this is my pet thing. People actually focus on all the metrics, but by helping employees understand that they really care and they are there to support, companies actually see a significant improvement in performance. And I have worked with organizations where we have seen a clear impact on customer experience and employee experience and how employees feel and how they've been treated, their well-being, when their well-being is taken care of, how they've made them feel and how it has impacted the customer experience. So we have seen that. So if you want to measure performance, which is the ultimate goal, start by asking, are my team capable of doing what it is they are expected to deliver? So then you can identify the training gaps and so on and so forth. Do they have the energy? Because if I am not with it, if I'm feeling low, if I don't feel supported, if I don't feel valued, then my energy levels are going to go. So start measuring the energy levels. Of course, people are measuring engagement, right? But don't stop at engagement. Try and understand why they feel that way. So go one level deeper by asking the question, okay, why did you feel this way? That you have to answer the question this way. Having conversations initially then helps you find the pain points for your team or for your organization. And then start putting the impact from there to the actions that need to be taken, which then impacts the result. So you always see that. And the alignment, how do they know that they are expected to do what they are expected to do? You can measure this. That then goes back to issues of empowerment, issues of mistakes, and so on and so forth. So this is something that you need to start looking at in a different perspective. So when we look at it, as I mentioned earlier, big companies start measuring profit, or most of them start measuring from the top line. What is the top line? Okay, what are the customers saying? Okay, how are our employees behaving? Okay, what is the performance? Okay, that is how people look at. But where we see genuine change is when people start looking at the problem at a deeper level. What is the problem that is impacting us? What are the problems our customers are facing? What are the problems our employees are facing? What are the problems in our systems? And what are the problems with our leadership team? What are the problems with our strategy? And how is that manifesting as behavior? If I am not clear of what I should do, I will be doing some random things, which then impacts my ability to perform. So I might be making a lot of mistakes. The quality of the output could have been gone wrong, or my customers have started complaining more. So then you can say, okay, if your customers are complaining more, how many of them have left? And how much of that has cost you the business? So you can see the profit equation come in last. When you start with profit and you start measuring profit and notice the difference there, it's too late. The horse is already bolted. You need to start going deeper into the organization and start looking at the problem and the behaviors that drive that. And that is where metrics can be built. And I have given a few examples, like whatever we've been discussing, so I don't want to be repeating it again, but happy to share some metrics that you could start looking at going forward. Now, this is an example where it is an organization. It's a UK-based organization, and this is a leadership team where they were supposed to deliver new product innovation on a regular basis, but they were relying only on their flagship product, one product. So we went in and we helped them see that their perception of what they were doing and how that could be altered. We said, you are not a company that is creating vacuums. You're a company that plays and works with air. So I'm not going to name the company, but hopefully you can get who it is. By doing that, suddenly the perception changed. And when you do that, what you can do with it became obvious. So then it started breaking into micro teams. How people felt about the whole thing was changed by looking at how you do what you do at a very senior level. And then we started building things around it. So we have got a board game that this organization played, and they got clarity on who needs to be doing what and how and what they should be doing to leverage their strengths, address this weakness. And all of this became very obvious. And as a result, the numbers that they created were not the performance numbers, but around people. This is how we want to make our team feel. This is how we want our innovation to be. Currently, we innovate X. We want our innovation to be 5X in X, in 5 years or 3 years or whatever. So it is how you start looking at this and what we did with them. This is a classic example of another organization which went through a cultural change across Europe. And they wanted to go through the cultural change without losing customers, without losing employees, and without missing targets. And they wanted to do it in 2 years. What we did was we actually coached the leadership team on what they should be doing and how do you ensure that you make your employees feel valued, respected, trusted. Because when you talk of cultural change, suddenly the word change brings in a lot of fear. So we started coaching them on how they could build their communication around trust and how change can help them see the big picture. And the organization, the leadership team involved employees at various levels to create the big picture and the future, which was then communicated to the organization. And when we did that, everyone was involved, right from the leaders to the one facing clients. And in some cases, they involved some clients also in seeing through the cultural change, which is very interesting on its own. And they did it with a metric, which was by understanding and building trust. How do we measure the trust? How do we demonstrate that we value their inputs? What does that mean from an empathy point of view? How do we ensure that we get rid of the change? And how do we ensure that people are clearly understood what we have communicated? Because communication is what I perceive of what you say according to my view of the world. So they ensured all this happened. And by measuring things which were not performance or not cultural change, because that was the end goal, right? By doing this, they managed to achieve the change, a cultural change, transformation in 15 months. Now, I can go through one more example, and I think we've been going on for some time. So the other one is basically we started working with a telecom firm where we started looking at why do customers who walk in don't buy from them? Why do customers who actually come in for a membership don't actually use or join. And then when we started looking at the issue, we started looking at the journey that the customer was going, not from a physical process point of view, but from an emotional point of view. We traced it back to the lack of clarity of the frontline or the reception or the sales team to explain things, and the lack of empowerment for the sales team to give some discounts to rope in clients. And by showing that and by building that, we were able to increase the customer signups by manyfold. And we also started showing by doing this how their employees felt. And we started measuring how customers felt. And by measuring these two, we could even correlate the ultimate revenue per square feet of the store. So that is a very interesting way to look at it. And we have quantified it and we have seen the impact of how that works. So again, going back, don't look at the big problem, because we always try and go and solve what we see in front of our eyes. Pause, reflect, see what is the core. Go and look at the problem rather than what you see as symptoms. And that is where this example actually opened up significant opportunities for this client. Now, if you're a leader and you're listening to this, these are the 3 questions that you should be asking. What people problem are we normalizing? What is it costing us? And what happens if we fix it? Because a business is an organization is a collection of people. And it is a collection of the behaviors of those people that then produces the results that you expect. Now, if the collective behavior of your employees is not aligned with what the market expects or what your customer wants, you're not going to make any profits. So rather than understanding or trying to solve the problem of performance and top line contribution, try and understand how do you change the behavior of individuals by getting them to think differently, feel valued and respected, and by building relationships. You can then start looking at what is it costing you. As I mentioned, I've been talking about quite a few examples and given quite a few insights on how you could start looking at things differently. And then when you do that, you obviously have a number that you can achieve, which means that is the leaky portion of your bucket that you have fixed. Now, having listened to all this, what I would say is, people decisions are strategic, customer, and profit decisions. Without your employees, the business doesn't exist unless you're a solopreneur, but you're an employee. So you need to be there. So try and fix the people problems, start measuring the people metrics differently, and then start addressing it the way we have said. Now, if you want to know what your business is, because I spoke of the bottlenecks the businesses have, and if you're interested in knowing what the bottleneck is in your business, feel free to get in touch and I can give you a free audit. Or you can go to our website and you'll be able to complete it and you should be able to get a basic report. But if you want something more complex, happy to help you with that. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation as I did sharing it with you. Thank you. Any questions?